Unmute our guest. I call him Arthur. Do you care what these people call you?
Sorry again?
I call you Arthur. Do you care what people call you?
Yeah, Arthur is a nice name. I like this name.
Okay, so Arthur, first of all, do you have anything that you want to talk about, like coming out of here? You want to introduce yourself just a little bit?
Well, let's go with the flow. You told me you will maybe talk about how we met. It's been a few years, so help me find these memories because yeah, I don't remember exactly how it was 3 years ago or something.
Yeah, I totally get it. Whereas I have just written your chapter in the next book. So Arthur's one of the people that I meet. We met up in Italy. I think I mentioned this to the people last week. If you saw it live, we met up in Italy and we tried hitchhiking a little bit, and then we spent about 6 days, maybe a week together, and we just went up in Italy. A lot of walking, a lot of train rides, and a lot of talking.
And I must say, physically quite a way, but mentally it was even further. I mean, we were talking all the time, and you saw this last time we everyday things because I don't really care, and I had this feeling many times that you were. Can you hear me? All right.
It cut out just a little bit. I wonder if it will right itself, or maybe, are you on Wi-Fi or something?
No, I should be all right.
Oh, okay. I wonder what's happening
hope
then.
It will work. Yeah. So what I was saying is, I felt many times that you are arguing, the three of you, about things that I really didn't care, and sometimes I felt I'm out of a conversation because I just didn't care. So back to Italy. So it was very interesting for me because with most of people you can't just talk about ideas all the time because because they care about things that don't matter really. I have this idea, this vision, which is it doesn't work perfect for me because it makes me feel kind of empty, but I think it makes my life more interesting also, which is will you care about what you think or what you talk about or what you care about? Will you care about it in one day or 1 week? And the truth is, you will not care. You will not even remember about most of things, about what you ate or how you spend your time. You know what I mean?
Yes, I completely understand. It's funny because I had kind of this awkward conversation with somebody yesterday. You know, kind of like somebody like the equivalent of this, although it wasn't this, but like, you know, for guys, when somebody's like taking, you know, testing your prostate and they have like their hand up your ass or whatever, and they're like, but you're trying to make small talk or whatever. And then I was like acutely aware, you know, so I was like making all the best small talk in the world. I was like, isn't it great that some of the beaches are open now, you know? And I thought, this is like ridiculous to be talking in this way, but okay.
Yeah, I get it. One thing is the topic important, and the other thing is does the other person really want to talk about it, right? Like with this this prostate thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I get it.
That's pretty good. Do you have any other? So then we also, random people, we also did like a 3 week, a little over 3 week maybe road trip in the United States. So we started off in Southern California, and then we went up to Seattle, and then we cut across to Yellowstone, and then we went back up to Glacier Lake. And yeah, That so I consider you a friend. You know, I'm really glad that we met up in Italy. I had like a great trip in Italy and stuff. But I also always find you to have very good insights, and this insight about conversation is a good one. Have you had any other recent ones that you want to like kind of elaborate on, or maybe I'll prompt you is easier?
Well, it isn't that a good time because recently I think that words are overrated because you can spend like half of your life talking about how things should be like and politics and how the world could look like, and you just waste your time while other people actually make this world.
Mm-hmm.
So, and every once in a while, I get this feeling that thinking is also about wasting time in a way. I think it's just about finding balance between action and philosophy of action. I mean, both ways are stupid, just to act and just to talk. And yeah, and I'm still flying from one side to another. Also, maybe it will be interesting for some of you hearing us. I have this idea that it would be very helpful, and it would make our lives, I mean, communicating with others and dealing with things much easier if we would care about it's pretty simple. If we would care about if we understand each other well, and if we care about details, because if we are sure that we agree about some things and we understand each other well, we can act as a group, or doesn't matter, company, institution, anything. While on the other hand, there's this theory in management. It's theory of trash can, which
Mm-hmm.
which says that every single person in institution, let's say, has a different idea of this institution, of what they are doing, how they do it, why should they do it, and the effect is every single person pulls this institution in a different way, and the only thing it produces is chaos. So I'm jumping from one thing to another, but what I want to say is, if we would spend time on making sure we understand the same way very basic things, it seems like wasting time, but in fact, I think it would let us save time. Yeah, one of my ideas about communicating with people.
You know, that's kind of interesting. I had a little bit of an experience with this maybe a week or two ago. So I have this nonprofit, and the point of the legal nonprofit is to provide telephonic legal advice to people who are being detained by law enforcement, by
All right.
immigration, et cetera, right? And so I kind of posted about it. You know, I follow a couple law enforcement people on Twitter, and so sometimes I engage with them, and sometimes I just advertise for it. You know, people are like, oh, you know, the tweet that I was replying to was something like, you know, guys at 3 a.m. after like killing their wife who say that they can't be arrested without first speaking to their lawyer, right? And I was like, you know, that's not a right, but actually they could, if they wanted to like call this particular service that I have, they would be able to speak to a lawyer. So that's the reply I gave to them. But you know, like there were some problems with the wording. The wording wasn't accurate. It was because I had just woken up or whatever, you know.
Yeah,
But
I get
but
it.
then so I get in that kind of a fight with this other law enforcement Twitter account who CC's. I think it's called Bad Legal Takes. You know, CC's Bad Legal Takes, and is like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You know. And then so I kind of like tell him, hey, here's what the the thing is. And he's like, you're an idiot, you know, like, did you graduate from law school? I'm shocked that you passed the bar and stuff. And I'm just trying to kind of like answer his questions, because it's clear, especially since the wording of my initial tweet was very ambiguous and misleading. Like, I can openly acknowledge that. He was just confused. He thought like you would actually have a physically present attorney. And I was like, no, it's telephonic. That's how it's always been. That's what the website says, you know, that I cited. And then he accused me of just like, he said something like, you're just changing your story now until you stumble upon something right. And I thought, this is like a weird thing to kind of believe, you know, like, why would I be changing my story? Like, what am I also doing? You know, like changing the articles of incorporation for the nonprofit, you know, changing my story. Like, why would I go to the trouble of doing that? I'm just trying to explain to you so you understand this. But I thought, like, I was kind of like, why am I engaging with him? But then I thought, well, I'm going to have to engage with law enforcement anyways, like, because I believe, kind of getting at your thing, where the theory of the business, where everybody has their own idea of how things go. And I
Yeah.
realized in talking to him that law enforcement has a particular viewpoint about how those interactions go, and that they have, like, in their mind, certain rights and responsibilities. And then I realized that mine were very different. You know, like, I had like this certain kind of perspective that was like, they basically cannot do anything to you unless they are explicitly permitted to do so by law.
Yeah.
And he had kind of the reverse view, that he could do anything, you know, like the opposite. He could do anything unless it was prohibited by law. Like, he basically could kind of control people. And I've just started reading this book at the suggestion of somebody, but this is all the plot, basically, of Malcolm Gladwell's Talking with Strangers, is the Sandra Bland case, where she
Yeah, I've
has,
read this book. It's very interesting, and Malcolm Gladwell is an incredible guy. I love him. I love him.
yes, but so far the book seems to be along these sorts of lines, is that everybody has in their view, like in their mind, a view of the world, and that's kind of their default position. And it's really hard to kind of engage with somebody who's not willing to kind of challenge that default position, and or understand that not everybody has that same worldview, that other people come to a particular situation with what are called prior beliefs. You know, so sometimes we just say priors. They have their particular prior beliefs about things that greatly influence the way that they even perceive or receive information that they're getting. And so you end up with situations like I did with the cop, where it's like, I was trying to communicate, but I was doing it poorly, initially poorly. He got the wrong impression. And then it was like he never wanted to kind of correct himself. And even when I did correct myself and said, oh, you know, I see in my initial tweet that I made a mistake, I used the wrong word, that's when he accused me of just trying to keep correcting myself until I stumbled into something correct. Like, he just wanted to be right, I think. But here's the most interesting thing about it. At the very end of the interaction, he had like these last 3 tweets in which he was like telling me that there were all these cases in the United States, legal cases that were binding in this particular area, and that like I was wrong, and that it was very well established by case law in the United States. And so I started replying to him being like, what are these cases that you're citing to? And then I saw that his tweets were deleted. And I wondered, why did he go to the trouble of deleting these tweets? And I thought maybe he actually did start looking up the cases and realize that they weren't clear. You know, the whole area is gray. It's a gray area.
Yeah.
Even I admit that, like, it's not clear that you're able to call up an attorney in those types of situations. But I'm doing it because, like, you have to do it in order to make it happen. You know, you have to do it. So it's kind of a good illustration of this, like, do plus talk. Like, it's fine to talk to the guy, and it's like something that does have to happen. But then ultimately it's like, you know, that there's nothing I can do to change the case law unless I try to do the thing. And then obviously it's going to get challenged, and it's going to go to the court system, who's ultimately going to decide on the issue. But that is like a lot of the way that we've done, at least in the United States, any sort of civil rights change, right? Is people kind of challenging the system, and then in court, and then getting these particular rights. Yeah.
Yeah, a few notes I have. Spoiler alert if you haven't finished Malcolm Gladwell yet, because I already did. So what he points in his book is people can't have troubles with communicating with others and reading others, let's say, not only because they have their ideas of who others are and what they are doing. It's also because of our natural tendencies. He points that we have a natural tendency to think about someone who behaves like a liar, that he is a liar, and to think that someone who behaves like he's honest, we tend to think that he's actually honest. And we think that this way because it's true in most cases, right? Like
Yes.
80 or 90%. So it was adaptive. Is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way we act and we think about others. But still, there are this 5 or 10% of people who are innocent but behave like guilty, and who are guilty but they don't care. So we think they are innocent, right? And it really is a problem for law enforcement, for example, because if you think that law enforcement works for 85% of society, it doesn't seem like a good result, right?
Yes.
85% sounds maybe good if you sell tickets for public transportation, right? If 85% of people pay for it, it's like, yeah, all right, it's not that bad. But if you think that law enforcement treats several percent people who are innocent like they are guilty, and which is I think even worse than treating several percent people who are guilty like they are innocent, so they can do anything. Yeah, so it's about transparency, which we get wrong. Another thing is about law. What you're saying that in states you have this right to call a lawyer, but if you don't say you want to call a lawyer, if you don't want to use this right, you it's like you don't have this right. Let's say I'm making it very simple, but it's generally, I think, a problem with law that it gives you some rights, but most of people don't use these rights. And I think it would be a really great world in which at least, I don't know, 70% of people would know their rights and know how to use these rights. And it reminds me of one of earlier Gladwell books. I think it was out of help me with this English title.
Mm-hmm.
Out of Scheme, Outliers. All
Outliers.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was this chapter, very, very interesting for me, in which Malcolm argues that people who achieve success in life, whatever you mean by success, their parents teach them to use their rights, basically, to become a part of society and to demand what they should get, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
this phone call with a lawyer, right? Because if you don't demand, it is, let's say, unlikely that law enforcement people will talk to you until you will call your lawyer, right? Because in fact it makes their work a bit harder, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so the optimistic version of or I don't know, ending of this story is, let's use the law, because we have the law, and if we will use it, it will yeah, make make the society more democratic, and make our chances in life more even, which for me is a good idea. But the pessimistic version is that people who know they have rights and they can look in internet or in books what they can and what um, yeah, what options they have. In fact, if you think about life and being part of society as like a game, right? Your rights are some options you can use or not in this game. So yeah, so this pessimistic version is that people who have parents like this, who will look for laws, use these laws, go to another place and then to another until they get what they want in good way, not like illegal, right?
Right.
Yeah, they will just grow kids who do the same, who use the law, who try to get what they need as long as they will finally get it. While people who don't care, don't think, don't observe will raise same kids. And um, I know it may be unpopular and people don't like this idea, but I'm afraid in most cases it's like this, and I agree with Gladwell.
Yeah, it's interesting what you kind of say about the law because, I think you mentioned it briefly, but to use the law is just one opportunity that these people are kind of trying to cultivate. And I think it says we have 10 more minutes. Okay.
All right.
So it's just one of the opportunities that they're trying to cultivate, but they don't have to use the opportunity. So for instance, the right to remain silent, there are certain situations with police officers where for whatever reason, like I think that it's like better for me not to remain silent, right? And there are other ones where it definitely helps me to remain silent. So just providing these people the opportunities. We have a name, at least in the United States, maybe you're familiar with it or not, for people who like assert their rights all the time, like especially in normal situations. So let's say you're at a restaurant, you don't like the food, so you ask for the restaurant manager. We call these type of entitled white women Karens. A Karen is somebody who always is trying to assert her rights, is like, this is
All
poor
right.
service, or this is like not a good situation. So
And they make the situation much more formal than it really is, right?
yes, much more formal. But I think it's not a bad thing. Like if more people were asserting their rights and kind of expressing their preferences, then I think it gets back to what you said earlier, is that we have people participating more in society with their communication. So we're able to see, because if people don't communicate their worldview is still there. It's still different, right? We're still not getting consensus. Like I could have just ignored the police officer on Twitter, right? But I think the engagement is actually how we're going to get to this
Yeah,
point
me
of
too.
understanding each other better.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
so
agree.
so Paula has a question. She says, do you think there is a relationship between psychopathy and obsessive compulsive personality disorder? Do you have a response to that one?
Well, uh, I think there is some link between psychopathy or sociopathy and narcissist tendency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other link I would make between narcissist tendency and obsessive compulsive behavior, because but it's just what I think about. It's yeah, you just ask this question, so that's what I think right now in a moment, and don't later say that I changed my viewpoint from 1 minute to another. I mean, it's a joke based on your Twitter stories with law enforcement, right? Yeah. So my idea is that psychopathy could be linked in with narcissist tendency, and narcissist can be linked to obsessive compulsive behavior, because you care about how you look, how others perceive yourself.
So I have a personal story and then I have another story about this. obsessive compulsive personality disorder thing. So when I saw my current therapist, although I kind of no longer see him because he said I graduated therapy, so that's pretty good, I guess. I did well there. But when he diagnosed me, because antisocial personality disorder is kind of its own thing, you know, there's like plenty of research out there that says that is psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder, are they actually the same thing, or are they kind of getting at different things? And so he didn't have the option of diagnosing me as psychopath. So what he kind of said is that my official diagnosis was that I was personality disorder, otherwise unspecified. And he told me that it had features of antisocial personality disorder. He said it was kind of like a three-legged stool, right? So it was that plus Asperger's at the time. Now it's autism spectrum disorder. And then he also said there was obsessive compulsive personality disorder aspect to it. So he said those were the three legs of the stool. So I absolutely think that there is a connection between psychopathy and obsessive compulsive personality disorder. I also think that there is a you know, the trend, I think, in personality disorders is to not focus on a specific personality disorder, but is to kind of do what my therapist did, which is to say you have a personality disorder. That's the basis. And then you have features, certain features of different things. Because like even psychopaths are not all the same. You know, you and I are kind of what I consider to be more on the hyper rational end of things. And it wouldn't surprise me to also hear that, you know, somebody would think that you're maybe a little bit autism spectrum disorder, because there are just certain behaviors that you do that are like, they're I don't know, like failure to conform to social norms type behaviors, right? But then with me, I do have obsessive compulsive thoughts. You know, I have like compulsive thoughts where, and then this was kind of what I wanted to talk about. And maybe if we run out of time and you want to talk more about it, we can talk about it another time. But I think what is common with these people with obsessive compulsive personality disorder is like this desire to control. And I think it comes from like a childhood of feeling like you're not in control and feeling like, you know, your primary caregivers are not kind of doing the things that you wanted them to do. So I think psychopaths who manifest more this obsessive personality disorder have more traumatic childhoods in which like control, or at least the illusion of control, is something that they really, really desired. And it's interesting because you're a little bit opposite. It's almost like you never kind of experienced that desire to control, because at least when we talked, you told me about your dandelion theory, right? And this like idea of buying your life. And where I would try to orchestrate a lot of things and really try to kind of make things happen, either from manipulation or trying to use my money or my power or my influence. Every situation would be like, okay, I want this outcome, you know, and I'm going to do everything that I can to get this particular outcome. You are like kind of the opposite, this go with the flow situation. Now through therapy, I've stopped this orchestrating thing, and I'm very much more go with the flow. But that's why I was thinking this morning. I was like, you are maybe one of the best examples of a psychopath who is not obsessive compulsive, and it's just like,
Well,
go ahead.
yes, so it's not that simple, you know. You may have this idea of me being this or that type, but the other thing is, if you, for example, when we spend some time in Italy or in States, especially in States where you were kind of a host, right? You had better understanding of how things are, right? So if I'm with a person who knows better, who knows the situation better, and have better tools, let's say, because you're from there, you speak, you're a native speaker, things like this, and you have kind of idea of let's go there and what about this. I'm like I will not try to be a second king, right? Let's just become a part of this group, and maybe say that this particular idea isn't that good, and that other one is perfect, and maybe here we should do this a little bit different. But I mean, I'm not trying to be control all the time, despite all the facts. And facts are that sometimes I'm not the person who have the best understanding, right? And the other thing is, okay, so it's another idea. I think it would be really helpful for everyone to ask a very simple question about most of things we do and what we think. And the question is it really important? And while I ask this question about most of situations, people, discussions, and things I want to do, most of times, many times, the answer is not, no, it isn't that important. So what I want to say is, if I consider something important, I really want to control this. And it's, for example, training of my body and also my mind, because I consider it very important to be in good shape physically and mentally. And do you call doing push-ups every morning for 6 months compulsive how is it, compulsive behavior? Well, it may sound strange for you, right? To wake up every morning and do a few series of push-ups, right? So that's one of the things I want to control, right? There are things I want to control, but I try not to control too many things, because I don't really need this, right?
Right.
That's my idea.
Yeah, it's a pretty good idea. We have quick, and we just have 5, 10, maybe 20 seconds, but the question